Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're looking for that shortcut to, well, really getting up to speed on the cutting edge of environmental science, you are definitely in the right place.
Yeah, it's a fast-moving field.
It really is. We all see the planet's changing rapidly, right? We're talking climate shifts, huge changes in how land is used, pollution, invasive species popping up everywhere.
Right, the big drivers are pretty clear now.
Exactly. But the real, I guess, the million-dollar question for researchers and definitely for policymakers isn't if we're losing biodiversity. We know we are. It's how. Like, what are the very specific biological, the ecological nuts and bolts that actually cause global change to lead to, well, ecosystem breakdown?
That's the frontier, understanding those mechanisms. It's still quite murky in places.
And that murkiness, that's what we're tackling today. We're doing a deep dive into an editorial that basically serves as a roadmap for this exact problem. It's titled Biodiversity and Ecosystem Function Under Global Change, an editorial for the special issue. The lead authors are Shukun Sun and Panayotis G. Dimitrakopoulos.
And it's a really useful piece because it's not just one study's perspective.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It synthesizes 10 brand new, really specific research papers that were all published together in a special issue. So it gives us this focused look at those mechanisms that, as the paper says, are currently incompletely understood.
And it's crucial to grasp just how urgent and, frankly, how global this is. I mean, conservation efforts, policy decisions everywhere, they really depend on us getting past these broad correlations. You know, like warmer climate means things get worse.
Right. We need the specifics.
We need the specific pathways. And the studies they pulled together cover such a huge range ecologically. We're talking everything from, temperate steppes, semi-arid grasslands, all the way to the eastern Tibetan Plateau, even really sensitive polar marine ecosystems.
Okay, let's unpack it then. Jump right in. Let's start with that core interaction, the one between climate change, nutrients, and our terrestrial ecosystems. These processes affect massive global systems, things like carbon storage, overall productivity.
Right. And nitrogen deposition, which is basically nutrient pollution, it's a huge focus here. One of the key studies they highlight looked at temperate steppes.
Okay.
And it showed pretty clearly that as you add more nitrogen, you significantly decrease species richness, just the number of species, and also plant functional diversity.
Okay, that sounds, well, fairly straightforward on the surface. But there's a nuance here, isn't there? Something that shows how specific the science is getting.
There is, and it's fascinating. They found this nutrient overload, this extra nitrogen. It affects the link between how productive the ecosystem is and its functional diversity. But, and this is the kicker, it didn't seem to affect the link between productivity and either taxonomic diversity or phylogenetic diversity.
Whoa, okay. That distinction, that's a real aha moment, like you said. Explain that a bit more.
Yeah, so when we usually talk biodiversity, we often mean taxonomic diversity, right?
Right.
Just counting the different species names.
The list.
Or maybe phylogenetic diversity, which is about how much evolutionary history is represented. But functional diversity is about what those species actually do.
Ah, their jobs in the ecosystem.
Exactly. Their roles, like how deep their roots go or how efficiently they use water, things like that. So this finding suggests that when you hit an ecosystem with chemical pollution like excess nitrogen, it's those functional roles that start breaking down first. And that's what drives the big changes in how the ecosystem works overall.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of our past conservation work, which often just focused on, species counts, might have missed this whole functional crisis unfolding underneath.
It's a really important question.
And it's not like nitrogen's impact is always negative either. There was another study, right, on the eastern Tibetan Plateau.
Yes, that one found that higher soil nitrogen levels actually boosted the stability and success of seed production over several years for a particular perennial herb. So
it's very context dependent, not just nitrogen bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But maybe the most surprising mechanism, the one connecting soil and climate, came from work in semi-arid grasslands. They looked at long-term temperature changes and, well, found a genuine plot twist.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What was it?
It was the day-night difference. This is really interesting. They found that long-term increases specifically in daytime temperatures were the main thing driving changes in the soil microbial communities. Much more impact than nighttime warming.
Really? Daytime more than nighttime? That feels counterintuitive somehow.
It does. But they even pinned down the mechanism. This daytime warming specifically reduces the ratio of fungi to bacteria in the soil.
Okay. And why does that ratio matter?
Well, fungi are crucial for storing carbon in the soil. They build these extensive networks. So when that Fungi to bacteria ratio drops because of the daytime heat stress.
Uh,
It actually ramps up overall soil respiration,
mm
meaning more of that stored carbon gets released back into the atmosphere as CO2.
Wow, so that's a very specific time-dependent pathway. Daytime heat, less fungi relative to bacteria, more carbon released, directly linking one aspect of climate change to the global carbon cycle.
Exactly. A very neat mechanistic link.
Okay, so we've seen how global change impacts the hidden world underground, the microbes. Let's shift focus now to how it messes with the interactions between species, the visible stuff, which obviously shapes how communities respond.
Yeah, and biological invasions, introduce species, they offer really clear examples of these competitive mechanisms in action. One study looked at alpine meadows, again in the eastern Tibet Plateau,
Right.
and it found that introducing managed western honeybees had a really dramatic negative impact on the native bee populations there.
And what stood out there was how specific the damage was, wasn't it? It wasn't just a general decline.
No, not at all. The impact hit hardest on the rare native species, specifically the ones whose niches overlap the most with the honeybees, particularly when it came to their food sources, the flowers they visited.
So the direct competition was strongest for those rare specialists.
Precisely. And that gives us immediate practical insight, doesn't it? When we're thinking about beekeeping, especially in or near natural ecosystems, we can't just think about honey yield.
You have to consider the wild guys.
You absolutely have to factor in the food resources needed by those rare wild pollinators because their specific functional roles, their niches, are being directly squeezed out by the competition.
Makes sense. Okay, moving from competition to environmental variability. There was that other finding about timing versus intensity, right? By Sun and colleagues.
Yes, another really crucial one. This was also in an alpine meadow in Tibet, looking at dung beetle communities and how fast dung decomposed, which sounds niche, but decomposition is a fundamental ecosystem process.
Right, nutrient cycling. So what did they find?
They discovered that the makeup of the dung beetle community and the speed of decomposition was influenced by when the rain fell in hell, the rainfall timing, but surprisingly not by how heavy the rain was or the total amount of rain.
Only the timing mattered, not the intensity or volume.
Seems so, for this system at least. Which really makes you think, doesn't it? If timing is more critical than sheer amount for a basic function like decomposition,
Yeah.
how many of our current climate models, our conservation plans, which tend to rely on monthly or annual averages, are potentially missing this vital temporal piece? Are we maybe preparing for the wrong kind of future change? Focusing on averages when the variability, the timing is key.
That's a really powerful point. Speaking of things we might be missing, let's talk about hidden threats. The finding about pine wilt disease sounds pretty alarming.
It is. Researchers found that sexually mature monogamous beetles are the key vectors. They spread the disease-causing nematodes when they feed on healthy pine trees.
Okay, beetles spreading the disease. But what's the hidden part?
The mechanism is truly insidious. This transmission method leads to the creation of asymptomatic carriers, infected trees that look perfectly healthy. They show no outward signs of disease, but they're infected. They essentially act as silent disease reservoirs, sustaining the infection and allowing it to spread undetected through the forest.
Oh, wow. So monitoring and eradication become incredibly difficult.
Almost impossible in some cases. The biggest danger isn't just the trees you see dying. It's the invisible mechanism keeping the epidemic going. A hidden threat, literally.
Okay, let's zoom out now. Go to the bigger biogeographical scale. This collection of research also gives us tools for conservation strategy, right? And helps understand physiological limits.
Absolutely. There's a study by Abedin and colleagues that's a prime example. They used modeling to predict the future habitat of the red goral.
That's a vulnerable mammal in South Asia's mountains.
Exactly. And the models predict not just habitat loss due to climate change, but also severe fragmentation of its remaining habitat.
And the significance there is.
It's huge for conservation planning. We're moving beyond just documenting current decline. We're modeling the mechanism of vulnerability fragmentation in this case. This allows policymakers to potentially design conservation corridors, identify crucial refuge areas proactively based on where the science predicts the species will need to be.
So anticipating future needs based on the mechanism of threat.
Precisely. And then at the other extreme, the cold extreme, you have the work by Morley and colleagues on Antarctic marine ectotherms, cold-blooded marine animals.
Living right on the edge.
Right on the edge of their physiological tolerance. Understanding their specific thermal limits, how much physiological flexibility or plasticity they have, gives us critical data on the mechanisms that determine which species can cope or not cope with warming in these incredibly sensitive polar regions.
Before we wrap up the specific findings, there was that really cool example of adaptation, wasn't there? The aha moment from Bay et al.
Oh yeah, the Elaeagnus angustifolia plant. A
Yeah.
fantastic example of adaptation to super dry, arid environments.
What was its trick?
It has these specialized, tiny, umbrella-shaped structures on its leaves. They're called trichomes.
Okay.
And the mechanism is just brilliant adaptation. These trichomes allow the plant to actually collect water directly from the air, from humidity, like condensation,
No way.
while at the same time reflecting sunlight, which dramatically cuts down on water loss through evaporation. It's a dual-function survival mechanism, shows how complex and specific adaptations can be,
Harvesting water from the air while shading itself, that's incredible.
isn't it? And finally, just to be complete, we should mention this special issue also included a different kind of study by Pang and colleagues. It was a bibliometric analysis.
Looking at the research itself.
Yeah, mapping global research trends over about 2 decades, specifically on carbon sources and sinks in farmland ecosystems. It helps identify where the research gaps are, what the emerging trends are, basically guiding where future research effort on agricultural carbon management needs to go.
Okay, so bringing all these diverse studies together, what's the big takeaway message from this synthesis?
Well, if you connect all these dots, the overriding theme that jumps out is the sheer complexity and interconnectedness of how global change actually operates. The really important thing to grasp is that the effects aren't simple, linear cause and effect.
Right, not just more heat equals less biodiversity.
Exactly. It's governed by specific timing, like the rainfall study showed. It's affected by specific functional roles, like the nitrogen and functional diversity link, and involves subtle physiological or microbial mechanisms, like the daytime warming effect on soil fungi.
So we're not just seeing average temperature rises bad. We're seeing that specifically daytime warming triggers a particular shift in the soil microbe community, the fungi to bacteria ratio.
Precisely.
Or that the timing of rain, maybe even more than the total amount, dictates how quickly nutrients cycle via decomposition.
Exactly right. And that means the future of doing effective conservation, of making smart policy, isn't just about measuring the overall losses. It's about rigorously dissecting how those losses are happening, which specific mechanisms are breaking down, under what conditions and where.
Which raises a pretty critical question then, doesn't it? What still needs doing?
Well, the editorial itself concludes that, yes, much more research is needed to really pin down exactly how these global drivers are altering species interactions and ecosystem processes in detail. The ultimate aim has to be using this more refined mechanistic understanding to guide conservation that actually works and policies that address the real drivers of environmental change affecting species and ecosystems globally.
So building on that, let me leave you, our listener, with a final thought, something provocative perhaps.
Okay.
Given what we've just discussed, that evidence suggests the timing of rainfall can be more critical than its intensity, and that daytime warming has distinct ecological effects from nighttime warming. How much are we currently failing, perhaps quite profoundly, to account for this temporal variability? Are we too focused on just the averages in our global climate models and our conservation planning, and missing the crucial role of timing in daily cycles?
That temporal dimension. It really does feel like a major frontier we need to explore much more deeply in ecology and conservation science.
A heavy thought, but an essential one. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into this really cutting-edge synthesis of global change research. And thank you for listening to this episode.